Radio Retro Future.
Hello everyone, this is Bonzert of Radio Retro Future, and I'm here with an unscripted video on my experiences while playing the beta of Fallout 76. So I'm just here to give you my impressions of it. It's not a review. I just want to inform you, like, is this game worth paying attention to, or should you just ignore it? Now, there is going to be two groups of people who are contemplating this question. The first one will be the people who never played Fallout. Is Fallout 76 a proper introduction to the series? And the second group of people will be the Fallout fans themselves. Because, is this a Fallout game? Like, at all? Or is it just a rehash of Fallout 4 with all the role-playing elements removed? My impression of the game, like, I already have the game, I already purchased it, so it doesn't really matter for me. But yeah, I do believe the game is fun. It adds something to the Fallout library that doesn't exist yet. And I think it's a great way to experience the Fallout universe in a whole new way. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have concerns where Bethesda is gonna take this. But one thing I want to make very clear, and I said this in a blog I wrote when I played it for the first time, this is not a typical Fallout game. A matter of fact, the first few times I played it, it felt more like the Stalker games. What's different about this particular approach to Fallout is that we don't see any NPCs in the game. Every contact you have with non-playing characters is through radio transmissions, or they are robots. Now, this has been done intentionally by Bethesda because they really want to have human interactions. All human interactions in this game will be with actual players, and I can only commend them for this experiment. And yeah, it does really feel like an experiment, and I hope that Bethesda will improve after the feedback comes in, because there are most definitely a number of pros and a number of cons to the concept that they're going for here. Now, storytelling wise, while we're on the subject, the environment is what we're used to of Fallout. You know, the environment tells stories into itself. When you reach a camp, you can see what may have transpired here. You can give your own interpretations. Like yesterday, when I played the latest beta, I found this tent filled with toys and board games, for example. And of course there are the terminals, there are the notes you can find. But yeah, it really feels like a second apocalypse has taken place here in Virginia. Everywhere you see the Scorched, which are, well, they're not really a faction. I don't know the full story behind them or where they came from, but basically these people are ill. They have turned into a kind of more intelligent version of the ghouls. The ghouls here are present as well, and they are very much like the ones in Fallout 4, except they are better dressed. And one particular touch I like is that they also wear uniforms, like, for example, firemen, policemen. That makes the ghouls a little bit more appealing to me. It makes them, yeah, it tells you about who these people used to be before they were ghoulified. Now, I haven't encountered any live ghouls yet, but maybe that's because if there were any live ghouls, maybe they were also turned into Scorched by the disease that is going around. Continuing forth on the Scorched is that when somebody becomes affected with this disease, first he becomes like a kind of a ghoul-like instance, except that they still use weapons, they still use firearms. After that, they kind of burn up from the inside and become these anti-husks that are all posed in rather, well, very live-like poses. So the effect apparently is very spontaneous, and they kind of freeze like, you know, you probably are familiar with the corpses they recovered from, what was it, Thermopylae? Yeah, it's like that, except Scorched. And they will also fall apart when you get too close or you interact with them. So yeah, that sometimes can become rather creepy, very unsettling. But you really get the idea that, you know, the life that used to be here is now gone. And in particular, this goes for the faction. These people are called the first responders. They are literally what the name implies. They were the people who tried to rebuild society, tried to keep the people alive, and tried to take care of them after the bombs fell. And unfortunately, their Virginia chapter has been completely annihilated by the Scorched. The Brotherhood of Steel also gets a mention. They had some kind of deal with the first responders. Of course, it was a very self-serving deal from the perspective of the Brotherhood, who of course demanded that the first responders gave them all kinds of resources and that kind of thing. But beyond that, I don't know much about the Brotherhood of Steel as of yet. Of course, you can find power armors scattered across the landscape. I have one somewhere in my inventory right now. Yes, they've done power armor somewhat differently. And that brings us also to the leveling system of the weapons. In my blog, I wrote about my complaints that I found like a 10mm pistol, but I could only use it when I was level 25. Now, my first assumption was that I could only use 10mm pistols when I was level 25, but that's not how the system works. The weapon types are not level based. I think that's very important to note, because this has been, I've seen various reviewers talk about this, like, oh, I found this shotgun, but I need to be level 10 before I can use it. No, it doesn't work that way. Yes, weapons have a level, and yes, you can only use those weapons when you reach that level, but you can find level 1 shotguns, you can find level 5 shotguns, you can find level 10 shotguns. The weapon type does not determine the level. Each weapon has a unique level, so to speak. You can construct level 1 firearms at your crafting workbench and level 10 firearms at your crafting workbench. So you actually need to replace your weapons. You cannot use the same weapon for the entire game. This is not bad overall. For one, the mods are very important. Also, the mods are very expensive, very hard to upgrade. So, when you have a level 1 gun, you probably will not be able to build a scope for it, or at least the parts you want for it. Because in order to get the schematics for these parts, first you need to disassemble multiple guns of that same type. So if you want to have a scope for a 10mm pistol, first you need to disassemble at least one 10mm pistol, but more likely more. So you'll be hunting for the weapons of the same type throughout the game in order to get the schematics you want so you can build the gun that you want. So you'll be scrapping 10mm regardless of the level. So eventually you'll find a higher level 10mm, or you can craft a higher level 10mm and scrap your older 10mm. So I have seen this somewhere in another game before, but I can't recall for the life of me what game that was. But I like this. So you find weapons and you actually need to gather them, then you need to bring them to a crafting workbench. That is something I like less, but it's understandable, because this also makes the camp system a very essential feature, but I'll get into the camp system at a later point in the video. So yes, you need to gather materials, you need to keep gathering weapons, and you need to keep switching weapons because of the level. At one point I was fighting certain enemies with a level 1 weapon, because I'm still very much in that Fallout 4 mindset. You upgrade your existing weapon. But no, here you actually need to replace your weapon. You can't upgrade your weapon to a higher level, which personally I don't like. Why can't you upgrade your existing weapon to a higher level weapon? I'm used to having a kind of a personal connection with that weapon. Like, I had this assault shotgun I found at a very low level in Fallout 4, and I used that weapon throughout the game, upgrading it, giving it new receivers, all that jazz. But now I have to scrap that gun to create a level 15 one. So that's the only part I really don't like about it. Of course, it was also very unpleasant supplies. When I noticed that I needed to level my weapon, because I was shooting at these guys and my weapons did very little damage, and that was the reason why. That, when it comes to PvP, is also probably the only thing that really separates the high level players from the low level players, because they have a kind of a system that levels out the players when they enter PvP mode. Now, I have not witnessed PvP, I'm not a PvP guy to begin with, so I don't know, I have not witnessed witnessed it, I have not done it, so I can't really talk about that. Now, there are certain quests. I think this is one I like. They have included several quests that allow kind of friendly PvP. For example, I came across this, it was a bit of kind of a museum somewhere where they wanted to do a battle reenactment of the American Civil War. So they had, the players needed to gather two teams. One would represent the Confederates, the other side would represent the other side. And yeah, then they would fight out in a kind of a bit of a friendly PvP match, I suppose. Now, it didn't happen, there were not that many players yet in the game. And like I said, people don't seem to be all that into the PvP to begin with. I encountered players many a time, sometimes they invited me to join teams. But yeah, you know, language barriers and such made it somewhat difficult for me. Unfortunately, because I'm on a European server, I suppose. So it means I'm with the French, with the Russians, etc. And yeah, those people just aren't that proficient in English. They try, don't get me wrong, they try. But yeah, I really like the interaction you can have with other players. Like, they allow you to be heard. As long as you have your mic open, you can communicate with players right away without having to use difficult, you know, chat commands and stuff like that. So that's, I like how that's done, and you could actually, you know, based on the volume, whether people were far away or close by. So if you wanted to talk with people, you actually needed to stand next to them, and I really like that. It makes it a little bit more, well, a little bit more human-like. But once you're in a team, that's not a problem. You can communicate regardless without having to use Discord. So hey, that's a plus. Now, why would you join a team? Bethesda said you can solo the game, and based on my experiences, I am prepared to believe them. But it surely makes the game a lot harder. You need to prepare a lot more. You really need to check your inventory management. Inventory is really, really important. And for that alone, a team is very handy, so people can carry various types of equipment and resources, because you're gonna need your adhesives. For example, you're gonna need your aluminum. These are things you'll always have a shortage of. And of course, there are things like grenades, mines, food is very important. You need to keep your food up. You need to keep your water up. If you don't have a lack of either of these, you have no action points. And action points are really important. First of all, you need action points when you're sprinting. So they are kind of a stamina bar. Second off, you need it for the V.E.T. system, and that brings us into the well-known trope of Fallout, which is the V.E.T. system that allows you to aim at specific body parts like the head or the torso and, you know, do critical damage. Now, in the previous versions of Fallout, the game would literally freeze, which is of course not a problem in a single player game. However, this is multiplayer, so everybody was like, okay, how they're gonna do the V.E.T. system. What the V.E.T. system does in this game, I prefer this version of V.E.T. actually, because it keeps the game moving along. Now in Fallout 4 they already experimented with this. The V.E.T. system would put enemies in slow-mo instead of freezing the game. Here it will actually just lock on. It's a kind of an auto-aim feature. And I like this version. My only caveat is that you have a very short amount of time to actually zoom in on the head or the torso with the mouse wheel. That makes it somewhat difficult. But yeah, that does make it more tense that way, I suppose. And it does make things like sniping and such activities more rewarding. And yes, you can still sneak and snipe enemies. So that's great. I don't know if that has any benefits in PvP, but I can imagine. Because when you make a sound, there is a kind of a volume icon above your head. So I suppose that when you're trying PvP, players don't notice that volume icon. So maybe there is a use for sneaking. I'm not sure. Love it, use it a lot, especially because I kind of specialized as a sniper right now. You can still have all your various combat types just like you had in the Fallouts. But yeah, the V.E.T. system, I use it most for close quarter combat. especially because my frame rate is very poor. I need a new video card. The V.E.T.A system really was a lifesaver for me. And because I often use a hunting rifle, I tend to, really need that V.E.T system because I have a weapon with no spread at all. So I'm trying to ward off sometimes small animals with a hunting rifle at very close range. It's just very hard, and the V.E.T system really helps me out in those situations. So yeah, props for that as well. Now, I've been giving this game a lot of praise right now. Are there things I really don't like about it? Not really. I have encountered no real things like, oh my god, this is horrible. One thing I must say is because, it's almost like a kind of a subscription-based game. Like, they have these daily challenges, they have weekly challenges, and these activate often automatically when you reach a certain point. Then all of a sudden they'll say, oh yes, you gotta take this camp place now, or hey, you need to you can participate in this event. And my quest oversight, which is in the right side of the screen, becomes completely cluttered with all these quests. Now you can simply turn the tracking of these quests off in your map. That's basically not a problem, but there's a lot of management involved in this game. You gotta manage your inventory, you gotta manage your quests, all that stuff. So it becomes rather cluttered. Okay, now we remember something. I can barely recognize water. What you're looking at right now is actually supposed to be water. I don't know if this is my current video card or that Bethesda really made the water this transparent. But basically what you're looking at is a kind of algae that's on top of the polluted water. And I can barely make it out. So all of a sudden I was knee deep into a toxic pond building up radiation. So yeah, that is something I would consider something of a major problem. But maybe that's my video card, or maybe Bethesda is gonna fix this. I don't know. If they allow mods, this is probably one of the things I want to see fixed. Back to the video. So that's and they haven't really changed the inventory that much, and I can imagine why. It's because it's also on the consoles. That was the problem with Fallout 4 for PC gamers, that it was an inventory system. It could have been a lot better, but they had to make it different. They had to make adaptations for the console versions, and they simply ported that very system to the PC, and they've done that here as well. Now, it's not as terrible as in Fallout 4. They made a lot more tabs. They separated, for example, the holotapes and the notes in their separate categories now. Thank God. There is a lot of improvements in that regard on Fallout 4. But yeah, the inventory system and the quest management is something I didn't really care for. You also gotta keep track of your food now. You gotta keep track of your water. And one thing that really annoyed me is the diseases. They included diseases. And I get it. It really makes it urgent to actually make sure you have enough boiled water, that you have fresh food, because food also tends to spoil. And if you eat radiated water, unclean water, or eat spoiled food, you may get diseases. And one annoying one was parasites, because that drained my food supply way faster than it needed to. However, there is good news on that front. There are perk systems in this game, just like the other Fallouts, and actually what they have done with this one, and I really like it, by the way, is when you level up, you may get a deck of cards. Now, these cards represent perks, and what they've done, instead of you choosing a perk permanently, you can now actually switch out these perk cards. So if you don't like your current build, you can just switch the cards. If you were like, oh well, I want to have immunity to spoiled food, for example, you can switch a card that gives you resistance to diseases from foodstuffs with another skill you're not using at that time. So it allows you to experiment a lot, and because this is multiplayer, it gives you that freedom, so you don't feel guilty for making particular choices. So I really like this system. And of course you can also upgrade. When you have 2 cards of the same type, you can upgrade an existing card to level 2. Just like in the Fallout 4 perk system basically. So yeah, you can also switch out cards with other players. So if you want, I don't know, to be really good at lockpicking, you can just walk to a player, ask them, hey, do you have a lockpicking card you're not using? And you can switch out cards. So you can actually trade them. I like that. I have not done it myself, but you could, and you can just ask players like, oh guys, I need a cure for diseases, for example, to name an example, and maybe players will agree to trade something with you. So very useful stuff. And other things you could probably trade a lot is things like adhesives and aluminum, because you need that to both repair and maintain your weapons and upgrade them, of course. Can I recommend Fallout 76? Well, it really depends on the type of experience you're looking for. And one experience I'm looking for is immersion, and that is what Fallout 76 most definitely gave me. Now, I wish they would include more of the stories and the environments. Like I said, it's there, but it's not as elaborate as Fallout 4. Now that's not strange, because it's a play to be collaborative, and also the game doesn't doesn't freeze when you're reading a note or exiting a terminal. Enemies will still attack you. Enemies will still attack you in your camp if you're not paying attention. So when you are building a camp, it's actually essential you build things like turrets. And I've met a few players who are very proficient in building up their camps. Basically what they've done is, instead that you can only build at certain locations, although those locations most definitely exist, is you have the camp system. It's basically a device you can move around the map and place somewhere that's not already a map marker. And then you can just construct whatever you want, whatever you have the plans for it, because you also need to find the plans. So you need to find the recipes if you want to create certain weapons or mods or medicine or whatever. So there's a lot of motivation for you to go out and explore random places, and that's what I've done. It's very hard to just say, oh, I'm gonna go for the main quest line, which I've tried, but I got distracted, and then I got invited to teams, and then it was like, oh, a daily event, and you get good rewards for those events, like Stimpaks, which are very hard to come by in the game, very hard to make. Now, one thing you can also do now, what you couldn't do in Fallout 4, you can now actually dilute Stimpaks and things like Red Away to take radiation away and all that stuff. So that makes resources a little bit more handy. I like it. It also adds a little bit of realism, which I like. Doesn't mean it's like it's in beta. It's very hard to say, like, is it gonna be a stable platform? Some players said it was stable on their end, so maybe the lag I experienced was because of my graphics card, but I found out I already have that thing for 3 years, so yeah, that's probably an acceptable time to upgrade, which I probably will. I don't really have anything else to add anymore. Like I said, can I recommend it? Well, it really depends on the type of experience you're looking for. Like, do you want like the full Fallout experience with the characters and the elaborate quests and that kind of stuff? This is probably not the game for you. If you just want a new approach to the world of Fallout, if you want to have a fun game to play with friends, yes, I dare to recommend Fallout 76, because there are elements I like. I'm not a big multiplayer person. I had fun doing it solo, but I also admit there is a certain charm to doing this together with friends and exploring the ruins and, looking for things like crafting workbenches together when you need to repair your weapons and that kind of stuff, and try to fix these resources for your fellow players to move forward. So, it really is a matter of personal taste. I cannot really think of any major criticism. Like, really, I haven't encountered any real game-breaking things. I have not encountered any real annoyances that I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible. Who wants to play this? Sure, there's always room for improvement, and there is a lot of room for improvement. It's just very hard for me to pinpoint right now. Case in point, I don't think this game deserves the hate it is getting. I think a lot of the hatred for this game comes from, oh, it's nothing like the original Fallout that I grew up with. Well, people said that about Fallout 3. People hated when Bethesda said they're gonna make a first-person version of Fallout 3. People demanded that it would go back to the original isometric perspective. I'm really glad Bethesda didn't. I really enjoyed Fallout 3, New Vegas, and Fallout 4. So, no thank you. I am willing to embrace this change. I don't know if I'll be playing it as religiously as I did Fallout 4. I will have to say that, because, well, the quests aren't as elaborate. The characters are just not as elaborate. Like I said, there are computers that serve as a kind of NPCs, which are funny, but they mostly give daily quests. They don't have their own elaborate quests. They're just things you are told to go out and explore. That's one main criticism I would have with the main quest. It's mostly there, at least point where I am at, to explore the world and the various functionalities within the game. Feels like a kind of a big elaborate tutorial and tour guide. But hey, who knows, maybe it will wrap up later on. So yeah, those were my 2 cents on Fallout 76 beta. I hope you found this a useful rant, so to speak, and I hope to see you all in the future, and of course, as always, make things